In 1827, to the disappointment of his wealthy parents, a young man dropped out of a medical school. And his father thought that maybe, since his son doesn't want to be a doctor, maybe at least he could become a priest, and got him a spot in arts faculty of Cambridge. But fate had something different in stock for this young, lost gentleman. During his education in Cambridge, he built on his interest in botanics and geology and became well-spoken among professors of the faculty. And later on, based on recommendation of one university professors, this young gentleman landed a spot on a Beagle. And so in 1831, just at 22 years old, our hero boarded a ship to sail around the globe. 5 years later, he landed back in Britain with a lengthy collection of expedition notes and artifacts, but most importantly, an idea that would turn the world on its head like none before it. Once an aspiring student who landed on a ship mostly to entertain Captain and to avoid his fast-approaching adulthood, 20 years later, Charles Darwin became an enemy and a hero of many. Darwin's work on the origins of species is perhaps one of the most important works that shape our world today. But among many interpretations of Darwin's evolutionary work, one stands in dark isolation. How did it happen that social Darwinism carries the name of Charles Darwin, despite him never actually advocating for these theories? But most importantly, why ideas of social Darwinism are so deeply rooted in our modern politics and culture. Welcome, I'm Anna, and in this video we are going to trace Darwin's work, The Origins of Species, to our modern culture and politics. Of course, this video will discuss discrimination, though no graphic content or any graphic descriptions will be present in this video. While ideas of social Darwinism can be traced way back into the past, let's start in 19th century just to make it more relevant to our time, and that's where we find the roots of modern social Darwinism. And of course, let's talk about Darwin himself. Darwin came from a very high-status family, but he ended up being sort of a disappointment to his own parents. Instead of continuing family paths of being part of a political group or businessman or entrepreneur, Darwin instead had interest in stones and plants, and he was going around collecting insects. But then when he went to medical school, he dropped out, and he didn't shine like a minister either. Of course, while ideas of evolution now are linked strongly with the name of Darwin, he was actually not inventing them. At the time, already there were plenty of evolutionary theories of different sorts. But questions still remained. Where do the new species come from? On one side, there will be creationists, and creationists would argue that all species that we see today were created as is by God. But of course, scientists of the time already knew that there were dinosaurs and mammoths, and they understood that the world around us as we see it today at some point in the past didn't exist. So of course, when Darwin went on his journey on Beagle, he didn't invent any theories from scratch. He was mostly looking for a proof for one of the theories that already existed. And well, of course, he also did find a proof of evolution over creationism. Darwin actually published 2 books, and both of them were published way after his return from the trip around the globe. One was The Origins of Species. The other one was a more nuclear text, a missing component, called The Descent of Man. After all, Darwin was a British nobleman, and he was also a Christian minister. He understood that the work that he's about to publish was going to flip the world of Christianity and culture of his time in general on its head. And well, excuse me for this scientific moment, but here is what you need to know about Darwinian evolution to proceed further into the video. Darwin was able to prove that through time, as environmental conditions change, some species are more successful in survival than others, and that through time, species change. He was also able to prove that each individual that carries variation within population is then able to pass on the genes that may or may not happen to be beneficial for the change in environment. Of course, even more revolutionary was the idea that people and humans actually are not as different from the rest of the animal kingdom, and of course primates are our closest living relatives. And with that, everybody went wild. Church was outraged that people are not created by gods. Monarchy and aristocrats were shitting their pants because there was no any natural justification for their place atop of society. Marx was ecstatic for some time till he figured out that Darwin's ideas on sociology are actually just reflection of what he already saw in British society. Scientists went wild because finally they had a proof that they could slap species together based on how they look in their morphology. And finally, thanks to Darwin, beavers could stop being fish and start being mammals. But one man in particular was waiting for Darwin's work like no other. In 1851, way before Darwin's publication of The Origins of Species, Herbert Spencer, a neckbeard champion of his time, published two extremely influential works. One was called The Principles of Psychology, the other work was called Principles of Human Happiness. Spencer himself was a rather interesting character. First of all, he did not have any formal education to be included in scientific circles of his time. Instead, Spencer was a railway engineer, a businessman and entrepreneur, and considered writing to be his hobby. Even in his time, he was largely dismissed by academic community. He was known for spewing pseudoscientific ideas, drawing conclusions where there is none, misunderstanding science of his time, and basing his decisions on folklore and single observations. In a sense, you can think of Herbert Spencer as the first public intellectual of his time. At the core, Spencer's ideas, of course, were talking about superiority of one people over the rest. But he was also a big fan of capitalism. He hated government and also was an atheist. As I said, Spencer did not have any formal education, so his inclusion into scientific circles would actually be influenced by two prominent scientists of the time, both of whom also had a strong beard game. One, Thomas Henry Huxley, was a strong advocate for Darwinian scientific ideas and actual Darwinian evolution, and the other one was cousin of Charles Darwin, noble knight, mathematician, and father of eugenics, Sir Francis Galton. But well, how is Spencer, whose ideas are most often attributed to the first ideas of social Darwinists, published his work way before Charles Darwin actually published The Origins of Species? This is because Spencer based his ideas on evolution theory, but evolution theory that was proven to be wrong. Unlike Darwin, Lamarck argued for a different type of evolution, a progressive evolution. Progressive evolution simply means that the traits that the species carry and cultivate in themselves are getting passed to their offsprings. So if a person is a blacksmith and they have a lot of muscles, they would pass those muscles to their children. If a person is a scientist and they cultivate their spiritual and intellectual knowledge, this is what they're going to pass to their own children. And if the person is homeless, poor, or disabled, then you guessed it. But that wasn't all that Lamarck had to contribute to this conversation. Another idea of Lamarck was evolutionary ladder. Lamarck's ladder is in a way similar to Darwin's evolutionary tree, with the exception that Lamarck's ladder actually has a direction. And so, of course, Lamarck had also different understanding of fitness of the species, where in Darwin's theories, fitness is fitness to environment. But in Lamarck's understanding, fitness equals complexity. Based on previous understanding of evolution, Lamarck built a progressive ladder. He did put minerals and bacteria at the bottom, then he put plants and animals, and then at the pinnacle of his ladder, atop of a creation, a white human male, or a god himself, depending if you choose religious or non-religious version of a ladder. But let us return to Spencer, who, as a pioneer of public intellectual movement, took ideas of Lamarck and slapped them on a British society. But don't let your modern understanding of racism fool you. Spencer was actually an optimist. He actually thought that this linear hierarchy of Lamarck is beneficial to society. Spencer was an advocate for letting poor and sick die, because with them, quality of being poor and sick would die. Herbert Spencer was a strong advocate for unregulated capitalism. He was also a strong advocate for removal of all governmental and non-governmental safety nets, be it education, healthcare, or even vaccination. The only permitted way of support for the poor was through philanthropy of the rich. Spencer was a strong advocate for the idea that the world would be a much better place if we just give up of our understanding of morals and our understanding of compassion and just let the weak die. And of course, any policy that would restrict the flow of natural hierarchy would be viewed as both harmful and unnatural. Spencer took a masterful move and harnessed name of Darwin to support his own theories. After all, name of Darwin was screaming science in all capital letters. Eugenicists didn't see Darwinian work as dismissal of their own ideas. Instead, they saw it as a tool that can be tamed and used to propagate their ideas of eugenics and scientific racism. Originally, Charles Darwin excluded human evolution from his work on the origins of species. In part, he did foresee that it may happen that people will use his science to oppress other people. And even though he himself, as all the characters in this video, was actively racist, he wasn't a eugenicist. He didn't really advocate for elimination of people or us taking control over our own evolution. But a decade later, in his Descent of Man, Darwin already was saying that social policies and governmental policies interfere with natural evolution of human beings. Of course, he didn't say that it specifically is a bad thing, but reader can come up to their own conclusions. Social Darwinism, according to Herbert Spencer's core understanding of it, is a competition of everybody against everybody for their own individual interests of superiority. We as people, according to Spencer, are constantly competing with the environment, but also with each other. And of course, everything that happens in our society around us, according to Spencer, is viewed through prism of hierarchy and purely biological competition. Herbert Spencer is responsible for coining in term survival of the fittest. And survival of the fittest among the people is at the core of social Darwinism. Even though social Darwinism that was created by Spencer was placed in realm of sociology and human psychology, it actually heavily relied on economics. In the eyes of Spencer and social Darwinists, the laissez-faire and unregulated capitalism is at the base of a natural flow of hierarchical competition. In capitalism, there is an obvious winner. Scientific and evolutionary view on capitalism is often claimed to be natural by fans of capitalism, though I will believe that it is natural once I see dolphin trading cash for getting high on pufferfish or something similar. Ideas of social Darwinism and this hierarchical competition in capitalism, of course, rely on the idea that competition is good. But more than that, it is an idea that hierarchies are good. While capitalism allows us to highlight an absolute winner of the richest man alive, and then tons of the people at the bottom who are, I guess, losers, we can obviously see who is the winner and encourage them to propagate their own genes, thus push evolution of humans forward. This idea, of course, is not new. We know that Epstein and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are known advocates for this propagation of the rich. And perhaps the most important thing about Spencer's theories is that what he proposes is a theory of everything. We can explain any social issue, any problem of your own, or any problem of society through understanding of social Darwinism according to Spencer. Struggles, inequality, and poverty are viewed as mere reflections of natural order. And of course, any governmental or non-governmental version of a safety net would be considered unnatural and preventing natural competition. Even back in the day, scientists already saw and understood that we do care for sick and young and elderly, even when it doesn't give us any competitive edge. So yes, even in the 19th century, academics largely dismissed Spencer's work, and later in his own life, even general public turned on him. Spencer was misusing and misunderstanding science. He was famous for applying thermodynamics principles to politics and sociology and human psychology. He was drawing conclusions where there is none. He was basing his understanding on wrong or selected facts. But none of this actually helped to prevent Spencer's work from getting widely adopted into policies and politics of the 20th century. Thanks to the brutal history of the 20th century, people now are not very comfortable with open advocacy for racism, for pure ethnostates, or for sterilization. No mainstream politician today can openly admit to being a social Darwinist without raising multiple red flags. Or can they?
They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
And so perhaps it is time for us to return from our 19th century adventure to our modern times. Of course, social Darwinism gave birth to eugenics and fascism of 20th century. But it is also true that through bloody history of 20th century, we dismissed some of those ideas, at least in their more open form. But problem is that social Darwinism and its pure form is not just discrimination. It is way more than that. Since social Darwinism is progressing from Lamarckian ladder and Lamarck's understanding of evolution, it supports vertical hierarchies too. Spencer was so successful at his time for the same reasons that Jordan Peterson is successful in our time. Spencer proposed explicitly that poverty and struggle that he saw during uprising of early and middle industrial capitalism were justified, that it was simply a natural order of things. A lot of modern conservative politics, and also, of course, a lot of neoliberal politics, and even the ones proposed by center and center-left parties, find their roots in social Darwinism and Spencer's idea of social Darwinism. In modern politics, social Darwinism is not something that is talked about or promoted, but something that is instead applied. It may seem counterintuitive to you to promote individual freedoms, but simultaneously close the borders. But that only is because we don't think in a frame of social Darwinism, of vertical hierarchies and competition of everybody versus everybody else. If we, for some reason, decide to accept the notion that strong vertical hierarchies and constant competition are a good thing, then everything turns. Western nations, as being stronger, thus deemed superior, can then go and extract resources and people from developing nations. This is a natural flow of things. But in return, when people from the said developing nations are trying to make their way into developed nations, that is viewed as a negative, as a bad thing. Immigrants are bringing with them inferior genes. They are bringing in poverty, wrong values as a biological characteristic that is imprinted on their impure immigrant bodies. And thus, of course, a lot of conservatives are not just being afraid of being replaced by immigrants in their workplace and in a society. They are afraid of being replaced by inferior immigrant genes. Other modern policies of today worldwide are very representative of Spencer's ideas too. It's not just Donald Trump and his Tea Party conservatives, it's Joe Biden too and other politicians worldwide. Our neoliberal urge to deregulate economy, enforce competition, and remove all the safeguards to let the hierarchies do their job. After all, there is only one way to separate the wheat from the shafts. Perhaps two of the main ideologues of modern social Darwinism are Steven Pinker and, of course, Jordan Peterson. Steven Pinker ends up on this list mostly to his delusional optimism, to his belief that we should just let the hierarchies do their job and everything is gonna work out just fine. The winners are gonna help the losers. We're all gonna progress up in our upward evolution. The same idea that Spencer was propagating in his time. Pinker also uses the same strategy of using selected facts and relying on science where he doesn't have to. But of course, Jordan Peterson is far superior in his influence, because all these people love idea of big and firm hierarchy. Jordan Peterson, of course, is known for his advocacy of hierarchies, except, of course, he is not advocating for survival of the fittest. Instead, it is success of the most orderly, the most successful, which is definitely not the same thing. What are you talking about? To quote Jordan Peterson himself, a hierarchy is a mechanism that selects heroes and breeds them. Dating gurus like conservatives like Incels believe in the same idea of a hierarchy. Women and men are located on a hierarchy of order. All of us are competing with each other all the time. Of course, alphas and billionaires and heroes are placed on top of a hierarchy and are encouraged to breed and propagate their genes, while those at the bottom are deemed to be too inferior to even have a sex with a woman. Our cultures for them are also placed on this vertical ladder of superiority, where often Americanized version of Judeo-Christian whatever culture is deemed to be superior. I am sorry, but you cannot get more Darwinian than that without openly advocating for actually eradicating people. And you see, originally I wrote this video to be about incels and Andrew Tate, but then I erased it, and then I rewrote it to be about tech bros and billionaires. After that, I rewrote the ending of this video to be about specifically Steven Pinker and, well, Jordan Peterson, the lobsterman of a hierarchy. But then I erased that too, because there is a deeper problem with social Darwinism. Of course, a lot of people that film and write this sort of video essay content, if you wish, have to fall on one of the more popular tropes. We need to speak about Trump, and we need to speak about Andrew Tate, and we need to speak about Jordan Peterson to make this video more relevant, to make you more interested, but also to please the algorithm. Thus, here I sit trying to spoon-feed anarchist theory into the algorithm under the names of Andrew Tate and Donald Trump. Problem is that social Darwinism is so embedded in our culture that nor you nor me, nor Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson or Trump are able to escape it. I don't exactly think or believe that people like Trump or Andrew Tate read Spencer's work and then try to apply it to their own life, because reading is simply just too beta, except for Jordan Peterson, because I do think that among many, Lobsterman is actually the one who read and understood eugenicists' works and tried to sell them to our modern culture. And that was a successful sale. Historians do trace formation of hierarchies to anywhere between early feudalism to as early as formation of agricultural society. But as in 19th century as today, we do see that this understanding of hierarchies is simply not true. Every day people jump into fire and water to save animals and people who they don't know. Strong hierarchies and aggressive competition on the individual level are not natural or representative of society as a whole, of society that we have now and of society that we had centuries and decades ago. No good person in this world is actively competing for food against their own children. But the problem is that politicians and scientists alike tend to do the same mistake. People who are writing these works and advocating for these ideas find themselves on top of a hierarchy, enjoy their position, and make a conclusion that not only this way of organizing society is beneficial, it is also natural. Darwin didn't invent social Darwinism, he didn't invent eugenics, he didn't invent discrimination. There is nothing in the origins of species that talks about it, just as there is nothing that talks about in Lamarck either. It wasn't Darwin or Lamarck or Spencer or Jordan Peterson who came up with all this hierarchical crap. It was us. To this day, we are drawing our evolutionary trees as a non-hierarchical spread out systems, but we still view them as a hierarchical ladder of superiority. This is how we draw evolutionary tree of life today. It is a circle where outside is now. All the living species that you can find on the planet, from bacteria to humans, placed on the same outside of a large circle. Evolution is not a linear process, nor does it have a direction. Evolution is not a race. It is not a competition of every species against every other species for the ultimate superiority on biological ladder. There is no absolute winner in evolution. There is no golden medal that is given out in the end of times to the most fittest species. There is no other species that is more fit to be human than us. Thank you for joining me today. If you liked this video, giving it a like definitely helps it perform and also makes me happy. Subscribing to this channel is always an option. And thank you for watching, and see you on the next book.